This is the Rokka Korpisoturi, a combat knife that also doubles as a bushcraft knife. If you're interested in hearing my thoughts on it, keep watching. Before we get started, I do want to thank Rhombic for sending out the Korpisoturi so that I could share it with you. So I'm going to focus in on the knife a little bit. Now, although I do call it a combat knife, or at least designed for military use, you're going to see that it excels at bushcraft more than anything else. So what I thought I would do is just bring the camera down a little bit, focus in on the knife, give you a few specifications for it, talk about its design, and of course we'll start with our demonstrations. All right, as always, we're going to start off by taking a look at the sheath. And this sheath that comes with the Korpisoturi is both a positive and a negative, or at least has positive and negative aspects to it. So to begin with, the material that the sheath is made from is Kareline, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that correctly. I will put it on the screen. It'll be in the video description as well. It is actually the same material used in the Kapilka sets of plates and mugs and bowls and all that type of thing, of which I've reviewed quite a few on this channel. Essentially, it is made from wood fibers and a synthetic material molded together to make something that is, for all intents and purposes, virtually indestructible and environmentally appropriate as well. Quite the minimalist sheath, but that in no way means that this is not tough and does not hold well. In fact, let me just show you how well the knife slides into the sheath and how well it holds. Can you see the split here? That split opens up to allow the knife to lock in. It doesn't have the same snap that you would have with a Kydex sheath, but then again, the synthetic handle kind of dulls that snap down. But there's no way that's coming out. It is just impossible short of actually trying or using the thumb ramp to push it off to get the knife out. And that's what makes this good for a military setup. Now, the other thing you'll notice is that there are 3 holes on this side. There's a matching 3 holes on the other side. And on the back side, I have set up for right-hand carry, is a malice clip. And this is a synthetic material as well. Malice, M-A-L-I-C-E. It is a military type attachment point that will work with POWs and other type of webbing, load-bearing vests, backpacks, and the like. So if you want to attach it to that, you can do so. It does allow for a belt carry through here, but honestly, it rides way too high. If I was using it on my belt, you can see how high it would ride. So I've made a slight modification. I actually needed to do this just even to carry it. And that is, I did put a small bolt and nut through here just to kind of pinch the malice clip close, and that allowed me to take one of my danglers and use it. Now you can see how high or low by comparison it rides on my belt. So it works out well like this. Now there is an optional Kydex sheath that is available through some of the distributors. Rhombic did not have it on their website, so I don't have it. I was considering buying it, but you know, when I came up with this workaround, I don't know that I will. It's working out just fine, and I may never actually change out for the Kydex sheath. I may, but honestly, I'm quite satisfied with it the way it is. All right, let me just drop that to the ground. We'll take a look at the knife. Now, we're going to go through a few of the specifications for this knife, and then we'll talk about its design before we get into the demonstration. So what we need to know is the overall length. This is a 9-inch knife. Now, that may seem a little small for a knife designed for military application, but they have designed it that way, and what it allows for is a great crossover into bushcraft or any other outdoor type of activities. By the way, Korpisoturi, I know I'm probably not pronouncing that the way it should be by the Finnish, is Finnish for wilderness warrior. So I think that's a good name for this knife, the Rokka Korpisoturi. Now, first thing you're going to need to know is that where this is made, in Finland, made by the famous Laurin Matalli. And I've reviewed a number of knives made by Laurin Matalli of Finland, and they are the masters of heat treat of the steel used in this knife. We'll talk more about that in a minute. So the other knives that I've reviewed, of course, is the entire lineup from Tereva Skrammas and Tereva Chakari Puukkos, now called Rhombic Skramma and Rhombic Chakari Puukko. Also the Batoning Ranger Sissy Puukko, and most recently the Finman Utility, all made by Laurin Matalli of Finland, all choosing the same steel. In this case is no different. This is 80 CRV2, and I've mentioned in other videos, nobody that I know of can get a heat treat like Laurin Matalli can from 80 CRV2. And this may be the very best example of it, because the steel in this knife has been hardened to 63 HRC on the edge. And I mentioned that for a reason. 63, that's super steel range and super steel performance from what it otherwise is a base level hard carbon steel. Now, the thing is, it's also been softened on the spine to 50 HRC. So it's differentially heat treated so that it is softer at the spine than it is at the edge. Edge holding performance, very sharp, will maintain that edge for a long period of time. And I would have thought chippy, but no, not in the least. No chips yet. Anyway, we'll put it that way after the use I've put it through. Softer at the spine for a reason. That gives it, maintains some flexibility, some springiness, so when this knife comes under duress or torqued, is pried with or anything else, or whacked on with batoning, then it has the ability to take that impact, move a little bit under that stress without actually snapping off. Because otherwise, if the entire blade was hardened to 63 HRC, then it's a good chance it would have snapped. Now, a few more of the statistics on this. I mentioned the knife is 9 inches overall, 127 grams in weight. The blade is 4 1/4 inches. The blade steel thickness is 5 millimeters or 0.2 of an inch. Now I know that sounds like a lot, but when I talk about the design, you'll see it's actually just the right thickness for it. And the material for the handle is TPE Dryflex, and I don't know if that's proprietary to Rokka knives. It is similar to, but not quite the same as the synthetic that is on the Tereva knives and on the Batoning knives. So it has a grippiness to it for sure, just a little bit different, and different color of course as well. So the other thing that I can show you now, and for me it's a bit of a con, but it makes sense on a military knife. You can see that it's full tang, full hidden tang, but the tang does extend out through the pommel of the knife, and this gives you quite a sharp edge for breaking glass and the like. I'm likely after this video going to round that off a little bit. I have no need for something sharp and pointy at that end of the knife, and to be honest, I find it a little uncomfortable in the palm of my hand if I hold the knife like this for drilling or any other tasks. I just wanted to make sure I could show it to you what it looks like. Yes, a piece of orange paracord, of course. All right, now the bigger things, the bigger talk and the design of this knife is the blade itself, and because here's what makes it very unique. The blade design, the geometry of the knife, and that's what's all important in terms of determining how well it will perform. This blade is known as a rhombic designed blade, rhombic, and I thought the easiest way to describe that is, well, I'll describe it to you, but then I made a little hand drawing. I know, don't laugh. If you were to look at the end of the knife, what you would find is that the knife actually is wider at the top of the grind line than it is at the top. So somewhat diamond shaped. Now where's my little drawing that I wanted to show you? So this is not to scale, obviously, and maybe a little bit exaggerated, but this is, if you were looking at the tip of the knife pointed towards you, you would see that the widest point of the knife is not the top like it would be on virtually every other knife, but is actually just down below the top. So in this case, it is at its widest where the grind begins, not at the top. Now, what's the advantage of that? It has a few advantages in terms of strength, meaning that it is at its strongest right through the center here, and that's carried out towards the tip. You can see how, well, actually, just let's take a look at the tip. You can see it still has, while it has a very fine tip, it still has a very strong tip. That's necessary, of course, for military use, but it's also a good feature to have on a bushcraft knife as well. The other thing it does, and a lot of people may not pick this up in terms of using it, but it does aid in carving. So when you're carving and you're moving this through wood, if you're going to be using it and making any kind of a shallow cut or even a deeper cut where you want to carve in and up through, having that rhombic shape actually allows it to follow the curve that you're creating a little bit better than if it was fully flat. Now people are saying, really, is it going to make that much of a difference? Not a huge difference. I don't want to pretend that it's something miraculous, but it is a little bit easier to carve with a rhombic shaped blade than it is with just a standard if this had been flat all the way to the spine. Now you can see there is a clip. It's a long, gentle clip. It starts right about where my finger starts, and it runs towards the tip. Okay? Now, the other thing, and this is probably the other thing that sets this blade aside, that is a full zero ground scandi. There is no secondary edge on this knife. And look how high it is. And at 63 HRC, you gotta know this is a performance slicer. Operates very much like a super steel, which you'll see in a few moments' time. Now, I just want to move down to the handle and share you my thoughts on this right now before we get on with the demonstrations. So I mentioned it's a synthetic, and now you can see how it is designed for gripping and holding your hand in place like you would want it to be on a military knife. It has these, well, jimping for lack of a better term, on the back where your palm is, or sorry, the web of your hand, and on the bottom where your palm is. It does have a bit of a finger choil here, so you can get around and hold on to it. And yes, it is exceptionally secure. It wouldn't matter if my hands were wet, cold, wearing gloves, not wearing gloves, it's not going to let go. You have a good grip on this knife. It locks you in extremely well. So well, in fact, that it actually can start to get a little uncomfortable through extended use. Now, it's starting to wear down just a tiny bit, starting to get a little bit more comfortable in my hands, but these ribs, they actually do. You can feel them on your hands over a period of time, so it's a little bit uncomfortable through extended use, but for the majority of people, you wouldn't even notice the difference there. All right, that's everything I want to talk about the design. Let's put it in action and see how well it actually works. All right, the first test we're going to do with the knife, of course, is batoning. Now, normally I would baton a piece of wood about this big with a knife that size, this being about 13 inches in length, maybe even 14, and 2 inches maximum in diameter, maybe a little longer or a little wider than that. And it will handle this size knife or this size piece of wood easily, no problem at all. This is rock maple, by the way, and I was going to actually use the knife and this piece of wood for the demonstration today, but you know what? This is what we're going to do. Now, this is not something I would normally baton with a knife of this size. Not that the knife isn't strong enough. Well, let's just dig the knife out and I'll show you. It has everything to do with the diameter. Now, this is about 18 inches in length, 3 to 3.5 inches in diameter, at least probably a full 4 inches there. In fact, I think I'll go that way as a result. But the reason being is, well, look, hopefully you can see, I've got about 3/4 of an inch hanging out over the edge of the knife, and that's what's going to make it very difficult to baton anything of this size. Just the same, this is just for demonstration purposes. This has nothing to do with whether or not the knife can actually take this type of abuse. It's just not what I would normally do with a knife of this size. So I want to get it right across the center. Like I said, there's not a lot to hit with. Now I'm coming right down to the knot. All right, whew. Oh, definitely rock maple, but you can see it was a little bit punky. Actually, there was a hole in the center, so it's not that it's punky, it's just that there was a bit of a hollow in the center. Still, it batoned a large piece of wood like that quite well. All right, I think what I'll do is actually baton the smaller one so that I can get some pieces of wood out of this to do some feather sticking, tent pegging, and the like. Actually, why don't we do that right now and get her done. And you'll see how easily this one batons. All right, that's what you want, right? That's an easy baton. Even that's a little wet inside. All right, I'm going to baton these ones down into smaller pieces, and then we'll get on to creating a tent peg. All right, I finished splitting out that piece of wood. I have one of the quarters, actually more like an eighth here, that I can use for the next demonstration, in which I'm going to be making a tent peg. Now, the point of making a tent peg is to show a couple of different skills with the knife and how well it will perform doing them. One, of course, is going to be putting the L7 notch in, and the other one to be putting a point on the other end. But obviously this at, what I say, 13, 14 inches in length is, and maybe even 15 inches in length, is too long to be a tent peg. So let's start with a little cross batoning just to bring it to a better size. And that went through easy enough. I'm checking the edge as I go through, by the way, and of course, as my experience has been all along, absolutely no deformation, no chips, no rolls, nothing that you would think, no dulling that I can think of either. All right, so we have something that's a better length. We'll try it this way today. We're going to create the L7 notch. So we'll put the stop cut in by hand. Carve out the place where the guy line will go. Probably go down a little deeper than that, yep. Okay, I have an L7 notch created on the tent peg itself, and here's my my findings from using the knife. It carves especially well with off of the thumb, like that, like you would expect it would, very well because of that point, and the spine is not so sharp that it's hard on the finger. What is a little hard though is pushing down through, not because the knife isn't sharp enough, because this is where that ribbing starts to get a little uncomfortable on the hand, is pushing on it for any length of time. And by the time I get to tent pegging, you'll begin to understand what I mean by a little bit uncomfortable. All right, so that is the notch. Let's put the point on the other end. All right, I chose one of the splits, nice straight grain. I can work either on an inside edge or an outside edge. Let's start on the inside edge, see where that goes, and if I have to change or if I want to change, I can. Start kind of high. Lost the first one. Yeah, this has been my experience using this knife for feathering. It is an extreme slicer, there's no question about it. But because of the angle of this knife, right down to 0 degree, it'll cut into wood very quickly, almost too quickly. To get the angle that you want, to maintain the degree that you want it to cut into the wood, takes a bit of practice. As you can see, this just wants to dig in. Now, when it does, it's not hard for it to push through, but it is hard to keep it from going too deep. Or not hard, just takes a little bit of practice. Let's try an outside edge. Change the angle up a little bit, use the tip. Go back to the inside. What have I got there? Yeah. It's amazing how much wood this will actually plane off because of that angle. But it's not exactly what I want from a bush, how should I say, a feather sticking knife. It is hard, that is just paper thin, that coil. But it's hard to get small little coils because it just wants to dig in so quickly, so fast. Let's try down the outside of this one. First couple on the outside edge tend to be a little bit on the old side and not necessarily holding on really well, but this is doing okay. If I lighten my touch up, I can do much better with small little curls. So it's just a matter of, like every knife, learning where your edge is and getting used to using it. It's a lot different than most of the knives that I have done feather stick work with. There, I'm getting a little bit better as I go along, of course, and you do, because the more you do it, the more you get used to your knife. Now here's the thing. This is not especially comfortable. You can probably see the web of my hand is red and is showing the grip marks from that material here. So this is, if you're going to be doing this for an extended period of time, you've got to know that's going to get a little uncomfortable in your bare hand. All right, one more test, and that is scraping. All right, our last demonstration is scraping, so I'll do 3 types of scraping. First, I'm going to start off with one of those splits from that piece of maple, using the spine to create some fuzz. And it does that quite well, as I expected it would. The wood is nice and soft anyway. Well, it's hard wood, but it's softer than the spine of the knife. Let's put it that way. Some fat wood to see if I can scrape some fat wood down. Starting to get a little bow in my fat wood. Let's see if I can cut a few of those little pieces off. Now, collect those all up into a little bit of a pile. Now, this is where my experience has been. It starts to show its limitations, and that is, remember when you do this, get rid of the gunk on the back of the spine of your knife. You won't get any sparks at all. The spine is not as hard as the edge. We've established that. But is it hard enough to throw sparks? Well, let's give it a little shot and see what happens. It is, but not as easily and not as intensely as it is with a sharper spine. Still, it's enough to light the fat wood up, isn't it? All right, I think we have enough now to close this video out. A few closing thoughts for the Rokka knives Korpisoturi, or Wilderness Warrior, made by Laurin Matalli of Finland, designed to be both a military knife and a bushcraft knife. Blade design reminiscent and based on Finnish puukkos. The handle very, very grippy, to say the least. I can't speak to its military use because, of course, that's not something that I'd be able to test this through, but I can speak to it from its wilderness bushcraft use. And here are my thoughts on doing that. First off, I really like the blade length. It is just about perfect at 4 1/4 inches. I like the high zero ground Scandinavian grind on this. I like the fact that it is rhombic in design for the blade, meaning a little where the widest is right at the top where the grind begins, narrows off towards the spine again. The hardness of this, I got to be honest, a little leery when I first got the knives that anything hardened to 63 HRC would end up chipping out on something hard like a knot in that rock maple. It hasn't happened to me in all the time that I've been carrying this, and as you can see, I've been carrying it for a fair amount of time. And all I've had to do, quite honestly, is just strop it. I haven't even put this on a ceramic stone or rod, just strop it, because it just has not taken any damage whatsoever. It maintains its edge just fine. And the only thing I can say about the blade that I'd like to see a little bit different, but of course it can't be, is for the spine to be a little harder, a little sharper on its edges. It's sufficient, it works. It's just not as sharp and as hard as spines of some of the other knives that I have. But then again, if it was any harder, the knife would not be as tough in use. So I'm willing to give up that little bit of sharpness to maintain the toughness that this knife has in that differential heat treatment. Now the handle, I like it and I hate it, both at the same time. I like the security it gives me in the grip. I like the warmth even in the winter time that it has because there's no exposed metal on it. But at the same time, I'm finding that with extended use and holding on to it, that is starting to get a little uncomfortable, little, I don't want to say hot spots, but that's pretty much what they are, just because of the texturing on the top and the bottom. It's both a love-hate, pro-con type of relationship with it. I can do without the spine or the sharpened pommel on this, but that's no big deal. If I don't do anything with it, it's not going to stop me from using the knife. If I decide I want to use it or soften or round it off, then that's an easy thing to do. There is one thing I want to point out that I have seen in a few other reviews, or actually only one other review, and it has not been my experience. One other reviewer showed that over time, I guess batoning would be the only way I can think of it happening, is that the synthetic material started to get separated right at the knife itself. Not this one. This is showing absolutely no opening up or anything else. Will it over a longer period of time? Hard to say. Okay, that's everything I have to say about the Korpisoturi from Rokka Knives. If you have any comments or questions, put them in the comments section. I'll put the link to where this is available on Varustelika's website in the video description, as well as all the other specifications, of course. But until next time, get out and explore and take that path less traveled, because it will make all the difference. Bye for now.